Highway fire truck accident. Fire truck accident on Highway 15, Rancho Cucamonga, California. What seemed like a peaceful night ride quickly turned into tragedy. It all started with a collision between a small motorcycle and a steel giant called a heavy truck. The motorcyclist sped through the night, enjoying every second of freedom on the nearly empty highway. The wind in his face, the roar of the engine under his feet, made him feel invincible. The familiar routine, revving up the engine, speeding past larger vehicles, seemed harmless. To him, it was just a game of speed, a familiar pastime every night. In the distance, the red lights of a heavy truck flashed in the darkness. The gap closed faster than he thought. A slight turn of the handlebars, a little too much throttle, and everything started to go wrong. The screeching sound of metal and the screech of brakes tore through the night. In an instant, his heart was pounding, and cold sweat soaked through his clothes. The straight road had suddenly turned into a giant trap, and he was sliding straight into it. It all happened in a flash. The motorcycle slammed into the side of the truck. The sound of metal colliding with each other reverberated across the highway. At over 70 miles an hour, there was no chance to brake or change direction. His body was sucked under the 30,000-pound monster, trapped between the steel and the road. Gasoline leaked from the tank, spreading quickly in a long black line. Then, with just a spark, the flames shot up, nearly 20 feet high, engulfing both the motorcycle and the truck. The truck driver managed to kick the door open and escape, but the biker could not. He was trapped in the twisted metal, flames engulfing every inch of his body. Helmets began to melt, gloves burned to ashes. And within seconds, the screams died away, replaced by the roar of the flames. The fire was so big that 3 fire engines were called to the scene, and the entire Highway 15 was blocked for hours. When the fire was finally brought under control, all that remained was a mass of charred metal and a deformed body. There was nothing to identify but the broken frame of the bike. Witnesses described the scene as a hell on the highway. Some stood still, others cried as rescuers covered the biker's remains with a sheet. Experts later confirmed, when trapped under the bike and the fire was at that level, the chance of survival was 0. Just one moment of error, and the price to pay was a life. On the highway, speed does not allow for correction. Motor accident. Summer 2021, on a remote highway in Turkey. A young man, more passionate about his sport bike than anything else, woke up to a sunny morning. For him, it was the perfect time to take his bike out on the road. On the seat were leather armor, boots, gloves, and a helmet. But instead of putting them on, he just glanced at them and left them behind. The weather was too hot, and he believed he didn't need them. He started the engine. The roar of the engine echoed across the empty road. Without any protection other than his helmet, he sat low on the gas tank and pulled the throttle. The speedometer needle shot up 60, 80, then quickly approaching 120 miles per hour. The wind whipped against his face. His heart pounded. Adrenaline rushed through his body. For him, it wasn't danger. It was freedom. The road ahead was no longer straight. A sharp turn suddenly appeared, the steel guardrail running along the edge of the road. At 120 miles an hour, even a half-inch of steering could have been disastrous. The front wheel began to shake slightly. The bike wobbled. He tried to keep the throttle, but the slippery feeling came over him. His heart pounded, his breathing quickened. In an instant, excitement turned to fear. He realized he was losing control. The sport bike slammed straight into the steel guardrail. The sound of was deafening. Metal hitting metal. The body was thrown to the side, and the rider was thrown forward. His head slammed directly into the edge of the guardrail. The force of the impact was terrible. His entire face was torn off in an instant. Eyes, nose, jaw, all gone, as if blown from his skull. The body collapsed to the ground, motionless. No more screams, no more breaths. Death came instantly. When the cars behind stopped, the scene before their eyes made everyone speechless. The victim's body was lying flat on the road, but his face was gone. Only the back of his skull remained, blood staining the hot asphalt. Some people covered their mouths, not daring to look a second time. Some people trembled as they called for help, their voices lost in panic. When the medical team arrived, everything was clear. The head-on collision with the steel railing had taken his life instantly. The forensic doctor could only confirm death on the spot. The helmet was still on his head, but it was meaningless when the entire front of his face had been blown off. Just one decision to disregard safety, and he paid with his face, with his life. On the road, speed and subjectivity did not give him the chance to correct his mistakes. Your step is hell. Across America, there are giant steel mills where men harness fire to create molten iron that powers engines, steel frames, and the pillars that support entire cities. At the Caterpillar Mapleton plant in Illinois, iron is heated to nearly 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit, 1,430 degrees Celsius, hotter than lava, enough to instantly obliterate human tissue. The factory floor here is a death zone. One wrong step and you're reduced to ash. So every breath, every movement must be precise, every move. On the 2nd of June, a 39-year-old man entered his 5th shift at his new job. Little did he know, it would also be his last. He was given a seemingly simple task. Take a sample of molten iron for testing. He turned a giant metal wheel, and a stream of red-hot steel poured down from the tank like lava. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal, and the heat was enough to burn anything that dared to come near. He bent down, approaching the edge of the boiling iron stream. Droplets of fire flew everywhere, and just one touch was enough to obliterate his entire face. But this time, he was safe. After taking the sample, he turned and walked away, thinking he had overcome the danger. Then disaster struck, a slip, a momentary loss of balance, and his body fell back into the boiling steel tank. In a terrifying moment, half of his body was swallowed by the orange pit. He struggled, clawed, tried to escape, but it was hopeless. The liquid fire rolled, tearing his flesh in an instant. Just one breath later, the entire half of his body disappeared into the abyss of metal. The witnesses were stunned. No one could believe what they saw. Part of his body was still on the steel floor, while the other had been consumed by the inferno. By the time the emergency crew arrived, it was too late. The plant was shut down immediately. An investigation began, and the question rang out like an accusation. Why was a man who had been on the job for less than 5 days in one of the most dangerous areas of the plant? This wasn't the first time. Just a year earlier, another worker had died in a similar way, in this very place. And now, another life cut short, in the most brutal way imaginable. In blast furnaces like these, safety isn't just a rule, it's a matter of life and death. When you're under a sea of boiling metal, you have two choices: take the right step or never take the step at all. Accident in machinery. It was a hot afternoon at the Whitworth, Texas, sawmill. The air was thick with the smell of freshly cut pine, the hum of machinery, and the sweat on the faces of the workers. The machine stopped abruptly. Inside, the logs were jammed, blocking the entire production line. To free them, they reached for the heavy steel cable, looped through the gears. They pulled, jerked, adjusted, hoping to break the jam, but the more they pulled, the more the cable tightened, shaking like a giant bow about to snap. Then everything changed. A sharp, cold sound, like a knife blade, crack. The cable snapped. All the pent-up energy was released in an instant. It whipped through the air, fast as a bullet, sharp as a blade. The blow turned the entire construction site into hell. In a millisecond, 4 men standing nearby were slashed across the neck. The heads were separated from their bodies, and their bodies remained in the same working position for a few more seconds, before collapsing in absolute silence. The 5th person was thrown aside, his leg bones shattered, blood splattered all over the floor. The scene was deathly silent. Sawdust, hard hats, and lifeless bodies were scattered. The remaining workers were stunned, unable to believe that their colleagues had just been wiped out in a single breath. When the rescue team arrived, all they could do was take one survivor with crippled legs to the hospital. The remaining 4 never returned home. The accident became a ghost that haunted the sawmill. Just one cable pulled too far, and 5 families were forever torn apart. In industrial plants, mistakes never happen twice. A small detail, a seemingly harmless wire, can also become a blade that takes a life in the blink of an eye.